Right. I reckon we'll go ahead and get started. So firstly, just for all the people who are viewing this video after the fact, welcome to our whatever 12th-ish e-training session. There's probably a number. I don't know what it is. We should probably, do you know what number e-training this is?
No.
I'll say 12. Yeah, we just want to welcome you and say thanks for watching this after the fact. Part of what we do here is try and provide support to our clients ongoing. We don't just make a sale and then run away. So this is kind of an effort to help keep everybody in the stream of what's going on. What we're going to be talking about today is microlearning. And along those lines, I would like to take a moment to hand over to Cara, who will be running us through her concepts, and we'll give you an introduction as to what she does.
Sure. So I'm Cara Negri. I direct the P&O data division of the Tarn Group, which started as a way to use video analysis in prosthetics and orthotics, and really has branched out into using the Bracken learning system for some of my clients as well as other clients. So, and I am currently pursuing my master's in instructional design for online learning. I've got maybe 2 classes left, so I'm, nose deep into online learning and all best practices, and so I'm hoping to share some of that with you and show you a little bit about microlearning. So I have just a quick couple bullet points of presentation. Hopefully you'll be able to see my screen here, but I need to move over to my presentation first. So just a couple points as far as microlearning goes. We'll just keep it brief because we are talking about microlearning. So let's go with that flow. So we'll go over some benefits and some best practices, as well as just a couple of applications. So the literature kind of tags microlearning as appropriate for the millennial generation, and I think that as much as we might be able to thank them for kind of bringing to light that education should be fun and engaging and maybe not take up as much time as we traditionally thought, I think that it's very applicable to all generations. Most people are very well versed at using media and want to be able to get what they want when they want it, and that's really where microlearning kind of comes into play. So we'll just quickly go over some benefits. The benefits are that you're creating engaging content for your learners. The studies really show that after about 8 minutes, you start to dip in your engagement, and after about 20, you're pretty much gone. So the traditional trainings that are taking an hour to an hour and a half can really lose people. And what that means for you as an educator is that they're not getting the content that you need them to get. So by breaking it apart, you can actually increase their retention. And that will then lead to transfer of those skills onto the job as you need them to. The other benefit from the instructional designer's perspective or the educator's perspective is that you can quickly deploy these. So you're not creating a huge curriculum anymore, and you're not creating big courses, and so you can actually get a lot done a little bit faster because you're really putting everything into bite-sized chunks. And when you're considering how to deliver this, you do want to think about those learners and mobile delivery. So, for instance, if you're standing in the line at the bank, you can quickly do a 5-minute class or course from your employer, and those are techniques as well as things that people and learners want these days. They want to be able to go into a learning engagement as quickly as 3 to 5 minutes. So, all right, so some best practices. Some of the literature says 10 minutes of, or less, but a lot of it says 3 to 5 minutes. So 3 to 5 minutes is really small. And what I have seen as some best practices that I'd like to say and show you are that the courses that clearly state how much time it's going to take to complete it. So it's nice as a learner when you get into a course and you see, oh, this is only going to take me 5 minutes to complete this, because then you know I'm going to do it. That's okay. I'll continue to go on. Whereas if it said 20, you might say, oh, I might do that later. So it's really helpful for the learner to see that right away. And then, of course, any videos or media that you're using, keep them less than about 4 minutes. This is just some best practices of, again, how you can expect that person to stay engaged with the video. We've all done it where we start to check our email or look at something else while a learning video is occurring. So if you can keep it under 4 minutes, you can hope that your learner will stay engaged. Now, when it comes to something that you're putting in a learning management system, it's nice to have a branching or options for the learner. And what this means is that for your learners that might already have a basis of knowledge, if they can skip or give options to learners that need more information. So give them less is more. So that last little bullet point, less is more. So give them what they need, the very bare minimum. And then you could possibly have links into your modules that give the people that want more that option. And again, that mobile delivery is important. So just some applications from the literature. They talk about microlearning for soft skills, for compliance. Again, compliance can be a very tough issue to get across to learners because it can be a little dry. So keeping things from 3 to 5 minutes of chunks, that's a little bit more tolerable for the learner. And then of course professional skills as well. So this is really taking a trend in corporations and adult learning, because we do realize that people are busy and we want to be able to give them learning when they need it. So let me just take that off and get you guys back. All right. So is there any comments or questions or anything about any of the things that I went over first, or should I get into a couple examples of what I have used as microlearning? Questions?
I have a question actually. Do you have any advice for content developers who are working with historical content that want to develop it into a microlearning type approach? How can they start? How would you get started on something like that?
I think that the basis of microlearning is really to break things down into those small chunks as much as you possibly can. And so you might have the traditional design factor where you're looking at the learning objectives, and maybe you break down each learning objective into a microlearning module instead of a complete course. But then also, I mean, like if you're going over history, some of the also best practices for microlearning is to allow people to choose which topic they want to learn about at that moment, and they can kind of go through in a scattered approach. But when it comes to history, you kind of have to have it in a little bit of a chronological order. But if you can sort of tie it together so that they get a little bit of flexibility, so if they're not necessarily wanting to learn about one thing right now, they can maybe come back to it.
Nice.
But really, I mean, for a curriculum development, you're probably going to be creating objectives of what is it that we need the learner to know when we're done with this course. So if you can do that as a bigger picture, and then just keep breaking it down smaller and smaller and smaller. And a lot of times when I'm creating stuff, we get to a certain level of learning objectives, and we think that we're going to make a course that's, let's say, only 50 slides in a Bracken module. And then all of a sudden we're blown out to like 100. And so we don't want to ever put that out there for learners, because that's going to take them, more than an hour to complete in one sitting. Now, the nice thing about Bracken is that they can always come back to it and pick up where they left off. So if you do have a big module like that, if you can break it up into sections so that they know when they're completed with one section and before moving on to the next. And then I also like to put in little knowledge checks at the end of each section so that the sections within the module are kind of a little micro-learning course of their own. So that's another approach to it. Because then that way you're not splitting up the entire content, but yet you're still making it so that they can consume the education at their pace and know that they can break it up into smaller chunks as they go.
Nice.
So, so I have here, you can probably see yourselves on my screen, can't you? I'm trying to pull off, but oh, there we go. We'll just move you down there. So this is one course that is an example that these were presentations that were done at a live conference. And what we did is it's a legal and ethics course. And what we did is we did need to have them all as one module, but we took each video and we made sure that it was less than 5 minutes each. So they will go through, I won't play that for you, but they'll go through and watch the presentation. So, the client, they wanted the viewer to see the actual live video and presentation that was happening in a conference. So before they took the quiz. So what we did is we tell the learner beforehand, each video is going to be less than 5 minutes, and that you've got, 5 of these videos to complete the entire module. So that's one way that we could break it up into smaller chunks. And as I was saying, with breaking a lot of content into smaller chunks, this is another module where we created, and there's going to be audio here. So we're going to have a menu. Oops, sorry.
In order to, if at any time,
here we go.
The Orion.
So now the learner sees that there are different sections that they could complete at one time. So, they're not having to do the entire course at one time, and they're aware of how the system works, so that they'll be able to pick up their place where they left off. And then last but not least, I wanted to show just one of the unique ways that I use the Bracken learning system to do a little bit of micro-learning. And that is for the video analysis piece, because Bracken does have that unique feature of video analysis. And with this example here, I use a role play of a salesperson sort of learning the skills of how to sell ADP, which is a security system here in the US. So this role play here is 2 people playing as one as the client and one as the salesperson. And as the facilitator of that learning, I can not tell them what they did wrong or what they did right, but maybe identify questions or things that I can ask them to reflect on. So that's a way that you can use this unique feature of Bracken to train salespeople to have a bit of a process of how they're going to go about getting to know a client. So I just wrote some fun notes here of identify the moment in the clip where you create a personal connection with the customer. So if the person was reflecting on their own sales skills presentation, they would go through and they would find that here is the moment that you're not going to be able to hear it very well, but she sits and talks about his book that he's got on his table. So then we could capture that as that moment, and we could actually reply here to that question. So that's a way that video can be used to facilitate that micro learning, and it's not necessarily as part of a course or a curriculum, but it is a way that the Bracken system is quite unique in using video and those commenting tools that we can have here. There's just one fun little example.
That's fantastic.
Cool.
Sweet. Any questions for Cara on what she's gone over thus far? I've got a couple of other examples that I can run through on our end as well. Shall we swap?
Yes, I'll stop. There you go.
Okay. And I think I need to put this back over here.
Cara's in Florida.
Yeah, much warmer.
Not actually in a rainforest.
Right, so examples on our end from what we've done recently. We've got work that we're going through with a client called Aotea Group, and they have induction material that needed to have that kind of a micro-learning approach. So this was initially a lot of documents and very, very wordy documents. So we went through a process with them of breaking that into pieces, and instead of having it all in one module, we built them a custom pathway that allows the user to attempt any of those in any order. So there's no prescribed order to this. They can do them however they want. And these are essentially just links into modules.
Are they short modules?
Yes, much shorter modules. So you can work your way through it on a module basis. And we've peppered them with some nice layout and some really standout points. And as you finish that module, if there's no questions associated with it, then you're sussed. But if there are, you would have to answer them to pass it. And then what happens is you get a green tick, and that box fills with color to indicate that you've finished it. So you've got a really good UI from a learning standpoint to see, okay, here are the bits that I have left to do. You can give them a lot of instruction before they even get here to say, look, these are really short, just go in and do them however you want. So there's lots of ways that you can use pathways to create that effect as well. Note on this is that it is a custom pathway, so we do have to do some design on our end, but if that's an approach that you wanted to look into for wordier content, we can definitely talk to you about how you could achieve something like that. For a more classic approach, we've got New Zealand Rugby League and their League Smart course. So this is a linear pathway that most of you will be pretty familiar with. And all that we've done here is a similar thing, split it into different sections. Their material, they did a fantastic job on breaking everything down and putting them into really nicely done videos. So each of these modules features one of those videos, plus occasionally some questions. So the user would go through, watch the video, and then answer whatever questions they need to answer about said video. So this is getting that repetition on board. And then as you finish it, same thing happens again. When you've passed that module, you would get this little green tick mark. So another indication of kind of where you're at. I think that's one of the things that I try to accommodate for when you're dealing with microlearning. You're dealing with a lot of moving pieces. You've made it much easier for your user in terms of allowing them to get that information, but you also don't want to lose the ability to navigate as to where you're at from a progress standpoint. So if you can cater to that, then you're hitting all the key points in my mind. So those are the two examples that I have of kind of how we use that from a pathway map approach as well. Yeah, I have nothing else, so I think we'll open the floor for questions if anyone's got anything specific that they want to ask. Doesn't have to necessarily be about this. If you've got anything off the wall, bring it on.
Do you have any authoring tips on Bracken for the pathways? Making a pathway?
For making a pathway? It comes down to the content really and how you want to break it down. With this linear approach, it's a little bit less intensive and a little bit lower maintenance because we don't have to go through and customize them so much. So it allows a lot of the clients to go through and actually build them. With this approach, this is something that we have to manage at this stage. We're eventually going to get to a point where we'll have a lot more easier to work with pathway maps, but right now it's still very design centric at this point.
Does this still work if you have like open-ended questions, like ones that like get answered by the that you can?
Yeah, you could have that kind of approach. These pass marks, they would be allocated by whenever the facilitator has indicated that they've achieved that question. So it works the same way, and you can, with your material, you could do that same kind of thing. I know one thing we've looked at for you guys is breaking them down into individual pathways. So you would have a single pathway for each module. And that means that you're actually using this nav panel as your progress marker rather than having them all in one pathway.
Yeah, I think it'll look at how a lot better. And we just had conference, so a lot of the feedback we received was that it was just quite daunting. I mean, the ones at the start, not as bad, but as they progress, maybe sort of more of the advanced training, some of those modules.
So
So,
how do you break them down?
Yeah, and so it's, the feedback we get is great. It's a hell of a lot to take in. Because people will go in and try to get one whole, you want to get one whole module done. You don't want to like stop halfway. But they're getting halfway through and it's probably taking them an hour.
Yeah, we could look at taking this approach with like a single module, for example. So you would have whatever the module name is here, and then all the different sections would be, in Bracken terms, they would be individual modules, but the user could treat that as I'm just doing pieces of this at a time. That's a good approach too.
And I think the tech is also really good as well, because all the time we have learners who think they've submitted it, so because they've submitted it, it must be done.
Right.
And then it's like, no, I've done it. But I think there's a good visual, so they can see that and they go, oh, I'm sure I've done that, but why isn't it?
Yep.
And then
they can chase it up. Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, for policies and things, going forward, you create education policies, and I think it's the way to go.
Breaking it out.
I need your help.
We shall consult.
We will.
We will indeed. Cool. Does anyone else have any other questions? Give you 5 seconds.
I was just going to say for the rugby modules, just as another way to let learners know how long something would take is you could actually put it there in the description, so they don't even have to open the module yet to see how long the expected time for that module would take. I think those are nice little things to add for people that might be learning on the go, or busy professionals that need to get what they can, as possible.
Definitely. Okay. Well, I think on that note, I shall deem this session finished, if no one has anything else to add. Okay. Well, thank you all very much for coming out. Always a pleasure to see everybody, and enjoy the rest of your days. Thanks, Cara. That was great. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.